Hello, and welcome to this tutorial series where I'll be showing you step by step how I made this RPG style AI. This AI features a threat meter. It will gradually increase when the player is spotted, or if the gun is fired. If the threat meter is raised but not full, the AI character will navigate to the location source of suspicious activity. If the threat meter is full, the AI character will chase the player, and when it's within range, it will dish out an attack, causing the player to lose health. You can attack the AI character with the gun, and if you manage to land a hit, it will flinch from the attack and lose health. Land enough hits, and the player will defeat that given unit. Now this tutorial will cover AI character rigging and animation, AI behavior trees, AI state using enumeration values, animation blending, animation notifiers, and more. So in this tutorial, what we're going to be doing is setting up our Unreal project and setting up the skeletal mesh for our AI character. So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and go to the Epic Games launcher. I'll launch that. Go to library and choose the editor that you want to be using. So I'm going to go with 4.24.2. Once that's loaded, go ahead and choose Games. Next. We're going to go with a first-person template. Next. This is a blueprint-based project. Maximum quality, no ray tracing, desktop and console, and we'll have some starter content. Why not? Go ahead and paste in or choose a location for your project and choose a name for your project. And then after doing that, press the Create Project button. Boom. That should launch the Unreal Editor. Okay, so once the editor is loaded, go ahead and navigate to your content folder, and inside that folder what we're going to do is right click and create new folder. We're going to call it characters, and inside of characters we're going to create the name of our character, a folder with the name of our character, Monster. Okay. Inside of Monster, we're going to have 3 folders. One's called AI, one's going to be called Animations, and one's going to be called UI. So now we need a skeletal mesh for our AI character. So I'm going to go and minimize the editor. I'm going to go into my graphics application where my character mesh is. This is a boneless mesh, so it's not rigged. I'm going to export it as an FBX file. I'm going to call the character Monster. There we go. Now that our character is exported, let's head on over to a website called Mixamo. So I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to go ahead and go to Google and type in Mixamo. I'm going to click on the first link. It should take you here. Now if you have an account, you can sign in, but if you don't, just go ahead and make one. It's free. Shouldn't take too long. So I have an account, so I'm going to log in. Once you're logged into Mixamo, you're ready to go. So the first thing you want to do is upload character. I'm going to drag in my monster character from my folder into my web browser. Okay, character is uploaded. I'm going to hit the next button. As you can see, this is the chin, because this corresponds to the chin. These the wrists, these the elbows, these the knees, and that's the groin. So I'm just going to grab this over here. I'm going to grab this onto the wrists. I'm going to grab this onto the elbows. I'm going to grab this onto the knees, and this onto the groin. As you can see, this is not symmetrical, so I'm going to have to manually adjust these points, these circles, by unchecking symmetry. Okay. It looks good. I think. Now the skeleton I'm going to choose is the one with no fingers. And next. This will set up the auto rigger. He's alive! So your character is now rigged. Congratulations. So we're ready to get this guy into Unreal. So the first thing you want to do, really, is we don't want any animation. We just want the T-pose. We can just go ahead and download that. And if the character doesn't start in the T-pose for you, all you have to do is look for T-pose, and you'll find it right here. Go ahead and download T-pose. When that's downloaded, what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the T-pose from my download directory into my For Unreal folder. Now, the reason I do that is because everything that comes from Mixamo has a skeleton, and the one that's for Mixamo doesn't have a skeleton. I want to keep those organized. Now, T-pose isn't a very useful name. I'm going to rename it to what the name of my character is, so Monster. Let's go ahead and get our character skeletal mesh into Unreal. So let's go back to the editor. In the Monster file, so inside of characters and inside of Monster, I'm going to import the skeletal mesh. This is a brand new mesh, so yes, we want to import the skeleton and the mesh. Our mesh is now imported. Now we need to get our hands on some animations for our skeletal mesh character, so I'm going to minimize Unreal. Let's head back to Mixamo. Let's get our hands on our first animation, jump. Let's use jump. He seems to be moving forwards. I'm going to go and make it in place. Go ahead and download that. I'm going to use the default settings. The next one we want to look at is walking. So let's do a search for walking animations. I'm going to go with this one. We're going to set it to be in place. And we're going to go and download that. Default settings. The next animation we want is a zombie attack. So I'm going to go up here and search for zombie attack. We're going to go with this one. Or perhaps this one. Yeah, the arms are a bit too close together on that. I'm going to increase the arm space. There we go. I'm going to go and download that. Default settings. The next animation we want is zombie idol. So let's do a search for zombie idol. Let's see, we could probably go with this one. Yeah, let's go with that one. Download. Default settings. The next animation that we want to go with is a zombie reaction hit. So let's go with that. Now this is when the character receives damage from the player. Let's go with this one. It looks pretty cool. we download that. Default settings. The next animation we need is zombie run. So let's see if we can find that. Let's go with this one. Before we download it, we wanted to make sure that it's in place. Download. Now those are all the animations we need. I'm going to go ahead and go to my download directory. I'm going to cut all of these animations and place them in my 4 Unreal folder. Then in Unreal, I'm going to go ahead and import those animations. So let's go to our monster folder in our characters, and inside of our animations folder we will click the import button. So we want everything except monster, because monster it's just a skeleton, there's no animation in it. It's a T-pose thing. So open. Now it's already using the same skeleton our monster is using, so we're going to choose monster skeleton, or whichever skeleton you're using, and we're not going to import the mesh. Import all. And here they are. Seems that there is one duplicate. I'll get rid of that. Let's get the threat meter set up. So navigate over to the monster, then UI folder, right click, user interface, widget blueprint. Let's call this threat meter underscore widget. Okay, now we're gonna open the threat meter widget, change fill screen to custom. We're gonna change the width and the height to 256 by 256. We're going to grab in a progress bar. Now the size X of the progress bar is going to be 138 and the size Y is going to be 35. Let's change the angle of this to -90. We'll do a search for % to check what colour it's going to be when it fills up. I'm going to change this to red. Okay. Let's go ahead and change the anchor to the middle. Using the arrow keys, we can move the object. Let's add an exclamation mark using the text object. I'm going to size this to context. I'm going to change the anchor to the middle. And I'm going to change the size. So we're going to do a search for font. Change size to 72. Using the arrow keys, we can move the widget object to a position we want it to be in. I'm going to go ahead and change the colour of this to red. Now this progress bar, I'm going to change its name to threat meter. Let's head on over to the graph. Now what we want is a custom event. called set%. It can be any name you want, but as long as it says something descriptive, it's fine. Let's add a parameter to that event. We call it in%. It will be a float. Next, what we want to do is drag our threat meter into the graph. Get threat meter, drag that off, set%. We're going to drag the execution, and we're going to drag off the in% parameter value. Okay, so from doing that, what we need to do now is highlight it by dragging a box over everything, like so. Hit the C key and type in a description of your choice. That is the threat meter done. Next, what we want to do is set up the health for the AI character. I'm going to go to this widget, the threat meter widget, and then I'm going to press Ctrl and W to duplicate it. Then I'm going to call this monster health. Okay. Right, so let's go inside of that. So inside of monster health, what we're going to do is, well, we're generally just going to make some modifications. I'm going to delete that. The health bar is going to be, we're going to get rid of its rotation, so its angle will just be, its default angle, like so. I'm just going to use the arrow keys here and just move it above the anchor a bit. And I'm going to resize it to 65 and 9. Okay, so let's see. $65 and 9. Something smaller like that. So using arrow keys again, I'm going to just reposition this. I'm going to call this health bar. Okay, so I'm going to rename this to health bar. Let's check out the graph. I want to rename these this event right here, and we're going to also rename this comment right here, and that's basically the health bar done. It can change its color to something like green or something. And that's the monster's health done. As you can see, I've renamed monster health to monster health underscore widget. I do that to keep the naming types consistent. Anyway, what we need now is a character blueprint class for our AI character. So let's go to monster AI. I'm going to right click, go to blueprint class, character, and let's call this monster underscore BP. Now before I open up monster BP, I'm going to create an enumeration. Just go to blueprints. So what I did, I right clicked, went to blueprints and enumeration. Let's call this monster underscore AI underscore state. Okay, we're going to open that. We're going to add 6 states. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first state is going to be idle. Okay, the next state is going to be investigate. The third state is going to be chase player. Fourth state is going to be attack player. fifth state is going to be return to starting point. And the last state will be as monster hit. So I'm going to go ahead and open monster BP. And inside here I'm going to set the mesh to my monster character's mesh. And compile that. What we want to do now is start adding variables. So the first variable we're going to add is evasion. Make that an integer. The next variable we're going to add is monster underscore AI state. So monster underscore AI underscore state. This will be our enumeration that we made. So monster underscore AI state. There it is. The next one will be player vector. So call this player vector. We're going to change this variable type to vector. The next one is going to be starting vector. Starting vector. The next variable is going to be player in attack range, and that's going to be a boolean. So player in attack range. It's a boolean. The next variable is going to be player. The player actor. So click that, type in first person. It's going to be the first person character object reference. The next variable is going to be threat level, and that's going to be a float. And at last, the final variable is going to be health, and that's a float. Now the default value for health, it's going to be between 0 and 1, so I'm going to set this to 1. Let's go ahead and add our pawn sensing to this character. So we're going to click on add component, type in pawn, and click on pawn sensing. We also need a class interface. So let's click on class settings. Click on under the interfaces, click add, and we're going to search for AI percep, and as you can see it narrows it down to AI perception listener interface. We're going to add that to this character. Give that a nice compile. I'm going to tweak the pawn sensing peripheral vision for the sight sensing. So let's go to peripheral vision angle. I'll probably change that to 80. Something a bit more friendly. That looks good. Let's set up our behavior tree and the classes it needs in order to work. So I'm just going to navigate back to where this object is. I did that by pressing browse, this magnifying glass. It would navigate to the actor's position in Unreal. Now in AI I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to artificial intelligence and behavior tree. Let's call this, what should we call this? Let's call this monster underscore BT. BT as in behavior tree. let's right click again. Let's go to artificial intelligence and add a blackboard. We'll call this monster underscore BB, as in blackboard. Let's add a AI controller. So right click, go to blueprint class, go down to where it says all classes and expand it out. Do a search for AI controller. Hit the big green select button. And I'm going to call mine monster underscore AI controller. You can call yours whatever you'd like. Let's set up the script inside of our AI controller. So let's go to the event graph, and what we will do, let's just remove this. Right click and add a event on possess. What we want to do from this is run behavior tree. So drag off this execution pin, release, run behavior tree. And which behavior tree do we want to run? Well, it's going to be our monster behavior tree. So you can just click this and monster behavior tree. Compile, and we're all done in our AI controller. Let's add a few variables in our behavior tree. So let's go over to our AI folder, go into our behavior tree, and let's start adding a few variables. So the first variable I'm going to add is a vector. It's going to be investigate vector. I'm going to call it investigate vector. The next variable I'm going to make is an object. It's going to be a player object. Come over here on the right hand side in the blackboard details, expand key type, and change object to actor. Okay, so the third variable I'm going to make is the state. So change that to an enumeration. Let's call this monster underscore AI underscore state. Expand key type, and we're going to choose the enumeration that we've made, which is the monster AI state. And the last variable we're going to make is a vector. We'll call this starting point. And we are all done in the blackboard. Let's go ahead and set up our AI behavior tree. So I'm going to go over to the AI folder, I'm going to open the behavior tree. Let's make a new service. BT service underscore blueprint base. Click on that, and it will open this window. Click on browse. We're going to rename this. Press F2, and we're going to call this monster underscore BTS. And there's our service. Let's go ahead and open monster BTS. We're going to add some variables. The first one we're going to add is monster underscore AI underscore state. This variable type will be a blackboard key selector. And it will be editable. The next variable we're going to add is the player vector. This also is a blackboard key selector, and it's going to be editable. The next one we're going to add is the starting vector. It's editable. And the last one will be the player, and it's also going to be editable. Let's add some nodes to our monster BTS class. So right click and type event receive tick. Let's go with this one. From this node, what we're going to do is we're going to drag off owner actor and type get AI controller. From the AI controller, what we're going to do, we're going to cast to our monster AI controller. From here, we're going to get controlled pawn. So drag off them as monster AI controller pin and type get controlled pawn. From that, we're going to cast to our monster BP character and just connect those up. Let's start setting our blackboard key values. We're first going to set the monster AI state. So let's drag that onto the graph and get it. Drag off that pin and type set as enum. Let's connect this to that. Now we need an enum value, so we're going to get that from our BP character, our monster BP character. So let's get monster AI state. Let's connect this to that. Next, we want to set our player vector. Okay. So let's drag in our player vector and get it. And in similar fashion, we want to set this not as an enum but as a vector. So set as vector. And we want to get our player vector. Connect this to that. Next, we're going to set our starting vector. So let's drag in our starting vector blackboard key selector. We're going to get it. And again, we're going to set as vector. From our monster BP character, we're going to drag off its pin, and we'll want to get its starting vector. And connect this to that, like so. And that to this. Oops. And lastly, we want to set the player object. So we're going to get the player, blackboard key selector. And we're going to set as object. And the class that's going to be housing the player object is going to be our monster BP character. So we're going to get, just drag off that pin and get player. And drag this to that. Now we only want to get the player if the player is valid. So drag from the player pin, release, and type is valid. And from here, we're going to drag off that, release, and type branch. Connect this to that. And if it's true, then this blackboard key selector will be our player in our monster BP, from our monster BP class. We are now done with the monster BTS. Compile and save. Let's head back to our monster behavior tree. Let's go to the root node, drag off that, and add a selector. Let's right click on the selector and add a service. Let's add the service that we created, the monster service, the monster BTS service. We're going to click on our service, and all we have to do now is make sure that these exposed variables match the ones in our blackboard. So monster AI state will be monster AI state, starting vector will be starting point, player vector will be investigate vector, and player will be player object. And that is our service set up. Let's add a few more selectors. Drag off the main selector and release it. Type selector. We'll just choose selector. Let's add a decorator to this selector. So I'm going to right click on it, add decorator, and this is going to be a blackboard based decorator. I'm going to click on this decorator. We're going to change observer aborts to both and change the blackboard key to Monster AI state. And the key value is going to be investigate. Now from this selector, I'm going to drag off that and type move to. And make sure that this blackboard key on this move to node is the investigate vector. Let's duplicate all of this. So I'm going to drag a box over it and press Ctrl W. I'm going to connect that up. Let's click on this decorator, and this one's going to be chase player. So this key value is going to be chase player, and when it's equal to chase player, what happens is that it's going to move to, just click on the move to node, it's going to move to the player object. Let's drag a box over this again, and we're going to duplicate this one more time. So Ctrl W. I'm going to connect this to that. Now this one, the key value for this one on this decorator will be return to starting point. This move to will be, the blackboard key will be starting point. We are now done with our AI behavior tree. Let's add two widget components to our Monster BP character. So in our Monster BP character, I'm going to add component, and I'm going to type widget. In the details panel, I'm going to do a search for widget, and I'm going to go to the widget class and change that to threat meter widget. You can position it where you like. You can even resize it. I'm going to do a search in the details panel for space, and I'm going to change the space to screen. It should disappear. I'm going to compile this. The next widget I'm going to add is the health. So do a search for widget after clicking add component. I don't want it to be attached to that one, so I'm going to just unparent it by dragging it onto it, and it should disconnect. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a search for widget again, and I'm going to set this one to Monster Health widget, and you can see the health, which is right about here. Again, I'm going to do a search for space, and I'm going to change the space to screen, and it should disappear. Compile, and those components are ready to be used. Let's set up the logic that controls the events that will occur when the AI character can see us. So let's click on pawn sensing. Down in events, we can see on see pawn. Click the green plus button next to that, and we are ready to add nodes to control the functionality for this. The first node that we want is the Monster AI state. I'm going to drag that in and get it. We're going to switch on Monster AI state. This goes to that, and from the pawn we're going to cast to first person character. Okay, now we can only be successful doing this if we're not currently being hit. So it's okay to cast to that character if we are returning to starting point, if we're attacking the player, if we are chasing the player, or if we're investigating, or if we're idle. Let's add a sequence node. So I'm going to drag off this and type sequence. Now from this node, we are going to set the state, the AI state. We're going to set it to investigate. Then, number 1, we're going to set evasion to 4. We're also going to set the player variable. And we're also going to set the player vector, which is going to be the player location. So get actor location. And we're also going to do a condition which will determine how the threat meter gets raised. So let's see, let's do the condition first. So we're going to check the distance between the player and this AI unit. So minus vector. Click on that, press Ctrl W to duplicate it. And since there's nothing attached to this, it would just refer to self, which is this AI monster BP character. And from this, we're going to get the vector length, and we're going to check if it's less than a float. So I literally just drag this and type the less than sign, and then it should show float less than float. So we're going to go with that one. Let's go with a value of 700. That works okay. I'm going to drag off this pin and type branch. Connect this to this. Now, we need a custom event, and that custom event is going to be raise threat level. So to do that, let's make some space, and we're going to create the raise threat level events. Let's create our raise threat level event. So we just right click and type custom event. And we're going to click on add custom event. Let's call this event raise threat level. Now this event will have an input of a float value. So press this new parameter button, and we're going to call it value, and it's going to be a float. Okay. Now what's going to happen with this is that it's going to add a given value, or whatever value this will be, whenever we call it, to the threat level. So let's set threat level. Now what I'm going to do is just drag the threat level in and set it. This will connect to this, like so. Now this threat level, we're going to drag it in again, grab it in, release, and we're going to get it this time. Now I like to increase the threat level by an increased amount every time, so what I'm going to do is divide this. So I'm going to drag off this threat level, divide it by float, so float divided by float. I'm going to go with a value of 20, so it's really small. Then I'm going to add that to, so float add float. I'm going to add that to the value that we will be adding to the value from the event. You can detach nodes by holding Control and dragging them like that. You can disconnect and reconnect. It's pretty handy. So I'm going to connect this to this, like so, and get a bit more tidy. And then I'm going to add this to fret level again. So it goes in here. And then this will go in here. Now I don't want this fret level going above the value of 1. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clamp it. So what we're going to do is just drag off this and type clamp. And we want to clamp float. The minimum is going to be 0, the maximum is going to be 1, and the value is just going to be the value that's coming from this. Let's click on this, move your mouse over here, press Ctrl W, and I'm going to connect return value to the fret level, and I'm going to connect this to this, like so. We are now done with our raise threat level custom event. Now let's make another one. I'm going to click on this raise threat level event. I'm going to move my mouse over here and press Ctrl W. Press F2, and I'm going to call this lower threat level. This one will be the opposite. Let's get this. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to drag off that. I'm going to subtract it. So minus float, so float minus float. This goes in the bottom one, like so. Whichever value we're taking away. Then what we're going to do, we're going to click on this again, this fret, set fret level. I'm going to press Ctrl W to duplicate it. This goes here. This goes here. So we're safely subtracting. But at the same time, we want to clamp it so it doesn't go below 0. So let's grab this, duplicate it, Ctrl W, connect this to that. I'm going to drag off this. Instead of adding a new clamp, I'm just going to click on this one, press Ctrl W, and duplicate it. This goes in there. This goes in here. 0 and 1. So it stays between 0 and 1. Now, let's add some commentary to all of this. You can add whatever comment you like, but I'm going to call it alter threat level. And we are done with our threat level manipulation nodes. Let's go back up to our nodes up here. So from the true condition, if the condition is true, then what we're going to do, we're going to raise threat level. And all this is doing, it's calling this event right here. So we're going to raise the threat level by 1. If the player is closer than 700 units, then it will raise the threat level by 1. If not, then the threat level, I literally just click that, Control W, drag off false. If not, the threat level will increase by a value of 0.25. Okay. So let's add a comment to all of this. So I'm going to highlight it all by dragging the box over it and press C, the C key. And you can add whatever comment you want. I'm going to call it raise threat level when player is seen. I'm going to compile that. We need to add some nodes down here to check whether the threat level is 1. So what we're going to do, I'm going to press the add button on this pin. So I'm going to add a new pin. I'm going to drag off this new pin, release. I'm going to type branch, can't spell. And from this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag the threat level in, get threat level. I'm going to drag off that, and I'm going to say, I'm going to type equals equals. and I'm going to click equal float. This goes to that, and if it equals 1, then what we're going to do, we're going to set our evasion to 10. And we're also going to set the AI, the monster AI state to chase player. We are now done with the site events for the AI. Let's create the events that will handle the reduction of the threat level. So, since I'm terribly lazy, I'm just going to grab one of these events here, one of these custom events. I'm going to go over here, press Ctrl W, and let's call this reduce threat level. So reduce threat level. We don't really want any inputs, so I'm going to get rid of that input right there. Now, we want to reduce the threat level by not every single frame, so let's add a delay. I'm going to drag off this, type branch. Now we're going to check if the player is valid, so player is valid. That goes here. Okay. And from that, we're going to have another branch. We need to check if evasion is equal, so equals equals. If evasion equals 0, and if it is, then what we're going to do, we're going to call the event. We're going to call this event lower threat level. So drag off true, lower threat level, and the value we're going to be reducing it by is a value of 0.025. Next, what we're going to do, we're going to add a delay, another delay. So I'm going to grab this delay over here, place my mouse over here, press Ctrl W, drag this to this. And this delay is going to be 2 seconds. Just before this delay, I'm going to add a sequence. So drag off this and release it and type sequence. From this delay, we'll have a branch node. So branch. And let's get our threat level. And if it's equal to 0, then we'll do something. So let's drag in our threat level. Drag off that, equals equals, float, if it equals float. So if it's equal to 0, then what we want to do, we want to set the monster AI state to return to starting point. Okay, so that's that. So from here, what we're going to do, we're going to drag off this, and we're going to release it and type do once. And then from here, what happens is the AI state will be set to, if the threat level isn't 0, if it's bigger than 0. Then the monster AI state will be set to investigate. And this only happens once, but we need to be able to reset it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this event here, this custom event. I'm going to grab that, highlight it, and press Ctrl W to duplicate it, and then I'm going to call this reset lost player. So reset lost player. And I'm going to put this in here, like so. So all of this will handle our reduce threat level event. So I'm going to drag a box over all of this, like so. I'm going to press the C key, and I'm going to add my comment. So I'm going to compile that. Let's create the nodes for our evasion reduction. Now, evasion is basically the duration of the investigation state. Once the investigation state is over and the player hasn't been spotted, it will return to its starting vector or starting position. So again, because I'm lazy, I'm just going to select this custom event, come over here, I'm going to go and press Control W, and I'm going to call this event reduce evasion. So let's call this reduce evasion. Let's add a delay node, and we'll put the duration to be 1 second. And from this, let's set evasion. We'll get evasion. Drag off that. Subtract. So I'll literally just drag off that. Press the minus button, and integer minus integer. This goes into here, like so. This goes to here. Now we don't want the evasion to go below 0. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clamp it. So I'm going to clamp integer. So CLAMP, clamp integer. Let's click on this. Move your mouse over here. Control W. Connect that to that. Connect this to that. Now, the minimum is 0, but the maximum can be whatever you want it to be, or whatever evasion will be. So I'm going to drag the evasion variable from the pin from evasion variable and put that into max. And we are done with setting or reducing the evasion events. So I'm going to drag a box over everything, press the C key, and put a description in, which will be reduce evasion, or whatever it is. So we are done with the reduction of evasion events. Now, depending on what state your AI character is in, you may want it to move at a different speed. So let's make the event for that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to one of these custom event nodes, and I'm going to come down here and duplicate it by pressing Control W. Let's call it set speed per state. So I'm going to set the name to set speed per state. Like that, and drag this to that. Now let's drag in the character movement node, and what we're going to do, we're going to drag off that pin and type set max walk speed. This is what we want. We want 3 of these, like so. So if the AI character is investigating, or if it's returning to the starting point, we'll set its speed to be 250. If the AI character is chasing the player, then its movement speed will be 400, and if it is being hit by anything, its movement speed will be 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's drag a box over all of this, hit the C key, and let's put a description in for it. And we are done with the speed manipulation for the AI character. Now we don't want to be seeing the threat meter 24/7. So what we're going to be doing is controlling the visibility of the threat meter only when the threat level is above 0. So I'm going to click on one of these custom events and duplicate it, and I'm going to call it set threat meter visibility. Okay, let's drag off that branch, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the threat level, get threat level, drag off that, and if that is greater than, float. If it's greater than 0, then what we're going to do, we're going to get our threat meter. It's a good idea to actually name these widgets. So I'm just going to click on that, press F2. I'm going to call this threat meter, and this one I'm going to call it monster health. Okay, so the threat meter, we're going to get it, and we are going to drag off that and set hidden in game. Let's duplicate that. This goes here, this will go here, and this will go here. So if it's not above 0, then it's going to be hidden. And all this is doing is setting the threat meter visibility. So let's drag a box over this, hit the C key, and type in your your comment. Okay. Let's add the nodes that will control the values that our threat and health will be in our UI. So I'm just going to zoom in and add another custom event. So I'm going to click on this custom event and duplicate that. And what we're going to do, we're going to call this one set threat meter. Okay. So we're going to get our threat meter from our component list. Let's drag this off and type get user widget object. That's what we want. So yeah, it's get user widget object, this one. And then from this we're going to cast to threat meter widget. And from there we will be setting percent. You probably remember this from earlier in the tutorial, where we set the percent on the threat meter, inside the threat meter UI widget. Let's drag in the threat level variable and connect this to that in percent value there. So I'm just going to drag a box over all of this, hit the C key, and add a comment. Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate this and do a very similar thing for the health for the monster character. So let's call this something like set health. And what we're going to do, we're going to drag in the monster health. And as before, we're going to get user widget object. We're going to cast to monster health widget. And then from there, we are going to set health. Now the in percent will come from our health value, which is this right here. So drag that into the graph, get that, put that in here. Let's drag a box over all of this, hit the C key, and put a comment in. We are now done with setting the health and the threat meter values. Let's create the nodes that will check whether the player is within range of this AI character or not. So again, what I'm going to do is click on one of these custom events. It doesn't matter which one, you can get any one. I'm going to go and press Control W to duplicate that, and let's call it something. Let's call it check player dist. Yeah, call it that. And then from that, we're going to do a condition. So I'm going to hold down the B key and left click and add a branch. So I'm going to connect this to that. Let's get the player variable, drag that in, get it. Want to get actor location. Of course, before we can move from this point, we need to check if it's valid. So is valid. That goes in there. So the player's location will be subtracted from this actor's location. So I'm going to grab this, press Control W to duplicate it, and then hit subtract. So drag off this, hit subtract, or the minus key, and you basically just want vector minus vector. So vector minus vector, that goes in there like that. We want to get the vector length from that. Just drag this, and if this is less than, so put the less than sign, float less than float, we're going to go with 300. So if that is less than 300, so I'm going to hold B, left click to add another branch. So if this is valid and this is less than 300, then yes, the player is within attack range. So let's connect this to that. The player is within attack range. So drag this in, set this to true, and if it's not, just press Control W and duplicate that. If it's not, then it's not within attack range. The player's not within attack range. So yeah. So again, from here, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be setting the AI state. So I'm going to borrow this from up here. I'm going to press Control C to copy it. Come down here, press Control V to paste. And drag this into that, like that. I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. This will go into that, like so. And this goes here. Okay. So on this one, if we are currently chasing the player and we're within attack range, then what happens is that the state gets changed to attack player, like so. Down here, let's copy that and paste it down here. The state will get changed to chase player. Okay. If we're currently chasing the player, or if we're attacking the player. Okay. Let's add a comment for all of this. So I'm going to drag a box over everything here, press C, and add a comment of your choice. Compile that, and we're done with that. Now, we only want the AI character to attack the player when the player is alive, not when it's dead. So let's quickly just navigate over to the player. You can get to the player by clicking on content and doing a search for first person character. You can go into that class. Now we're going to add a variable called health. So add variable, type health, and that's going to be a float. Compile that. Make sure the float is 1, has a value of 1, okay, to begin with, and just compile it. Let's head back to our Monster BP class, and what we're going to do, we're going to start creating events that will control when the AI is allowed to attack. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select one of these custom events, doesn't matter which one. I'm going to press Control C to copy it and Control V to paste it down here. Control W doesn't always work, so I just copy and paste, which seems to be more reliable. Let's call it something like check player health. Let's add 2 branch nodes, so hold B down, left click, and do it again. We're going to drag in the player variable, get player, type is valid, goes in there, this goes in here, and this goes in here. What we're going to do, we're going to drag off the player and type in health. We want to get health, and from that we're going to drag off this and type the more than sign, so if float is greater than float. Drag off that, type and select and boolean. This will go into this. So and what? Well, and the AI health being greater than 0. So I'm going to drag the AI health in, get health. I'm going to grab this, copy it, paste it. This goes in here, this goes in here. So if the health is greater than 0, it's allowed to do the attacks, but if it's not, then the AI state will be set to something. Let's set its state to if it's false, so if either one is dead, then we're going to set its state to idle. Let's add a comment for this. So drag a box over everything, press C, and put a comment in. Okay. Let's create the nodes that will allow the AI character to receive damage. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab any of these nodes, copy it, and paste it. Let's call it do damage events. From this, we're going to do once. So drag off that, type do once. Let's select this. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this and paste it, and we're going to call that one reset damage events. So reset damage events. Right, from this, we're going to set health to health. So grab that in and get health again. Minus. So float minus float. This goes in here. So what value are we subtracting? Well, we can subtract a small value like 0.07. And again, we want to clamp this. So clamp. We want to clamp float between 0 and 1. So copy this, paste it over here, put this here. This goes in here. Now we need to reset this somehow. So what we're going to do is, after we've attacked the player, after the AI has attacked the player, we're going to wait a certain amount of time before attacking them again. So delay, add a delay, 0.2 seconds, and then we're going to call reset damage events. So reset damage events. Okay. So let's just drag a box over all of this, press the C key, and we'll just call it damage events. Next, we need to add a event that occurs when the monster AI character is defeated. So again, let's go in and we're going to copy one of these events, paste it down here. Let's call this monster death event. Okay. Hold down B, left click, connect this to that. We're going to add health, so drag in our health variable, get it, drag off that, type equals equals, that's equal to 0. Then what happens is done once, so do once. Let's drag in the mesh, set simulate physics, set that to true, and what we're going to do, we want to totally get rid of the or hide the threat meter and the monster health. Okay, we want to set visibility. Connect this to that. And then soon after that, let's add a delay. About 3 seconds. It can be whatever time you want. We're going to destroy the actor. So destroy actor. Okay, so let's drag a box over everything, press the C key, and let's add a comment. We are now ready to call these events at runtime, so I'm just going to go up the top, right click and type begin play. Okay, so from the begin play node, I'm going to add a set starting vector. That will call the set starting vector event. And we're also going to right click again and type event tick. And there's quite a few events that we're going to call. The first one we're going to call is reduce evasion. The next one is reduce threat level. The next one is set speed per state. The next one is set threat meter. The next one is set threat meter visibility. The one after that is check player health. The next one is set health. The next one after that is monster death event. We could also add the event. You also need the event check player dist. Okay. We can drag a box over all of that and type events or something along those lines. Now before we can use this AI character, let's go to the class defaults. I'm going to go and search for the AI controller class, and it needs to be the monster AI controller. I'm also going to type in possess, and we want it to be possessed either when it's placed in the world or spawned, so in case you want to spawn the AI character. So placed in world or spawned. Let's create a one-directional blend space for our AI character. So I'm going to go over to the animations folder. I'm going to right click, go to animation, go to blend space 1D. I'm going to choose monster skeleton, and I'm going to call this monster underscore idle underscore walk underscore run. Open up the one directional blend space. Over here on the left in the asset details panel, on the horizontal axis, change the name to speed. I'm going to change the maximum axis value to 400. Let's start dragging the animations in. So I'm going to start with zombie idle, drag that to the far left, and I'm going to go with zombie running to the far right and also to the middle, so drag those in. The middle one, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to change the rate scale to 0.5. Hold shift and move your mouse. We are now done setting up the one directional blend space. Let's create a animation blueprint. So head back to the content browser, right click inside of the animations folder, go to animation and choose animation blueprint. Let's choose the monster skeleton and hit OK. Let's call this monster underscore anim BP. Before we do any work on our animation blueprint, let's add some notifiers to our monster attack and the monster hit. So if we take a look at monster attack, the zombie attack animation, if we go in there, we know that he attacks about here. So let's add a notify for that. So I'm going to right click, add notify, new notify, and I'm going to call this attack landed. Okay, that's that. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go over to the reaction hit, and I'm basically just going to look at the place where we can tell it to stop suffering the attack. So it's about here. There we could put a notify right here. So right click, add notify, new notify, and we can say, we can call it something like attack recover. Okay, or I don't know, we can call it hit recover. And those are our notifiers. Let's go into our monster animation blueprint. Before we do anything, let's add a few variables. We're going to add speed. That's going to be a float. The next variable we're going to add is a boolean, and it's going to be called attack. The next one's going to be called monster hit, and that's a boolean. The next one after that is going to be is falling, and that's a boolean. Let's head over to the event graph, and from here what we're going to do, from the try get pawn owner, drag off that and type cast to monster BP. I'm going to connect this to this like so, and from here we're going to set the speed. We do that by getting the velocity, so drag off that and get velocity. Here it is. From there we get the vector length, so vector length, and from that we're going to set speed. So if we drag speed in here, set speed, put this to that and this to this. Let's drag off this again and type character movement. Scroll down to the bottom, get character movement. Drag off this and type is falling. Click on that, and we're going to use this to set is falling boolean here. We are now done with that. Let's go ahead and create a player UI widget. So I'm going to go over to the content browser. I'm going to do a search for first person character. I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to go and show it in folder view. That will take me right to that actor's location. I'm going to right click here and create a new user interface, a widget blueprint. I'm going to call this player UI underscore UMG. Or we can call it player UI underscore widget. That's probably a better name for it actually. So I'm going to open that. Okay, so let's add an image. So IMAGE, I'm going to add an image, drag it in. Let's make it black. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to drag this corner right over here, like so. I want it to take up maybe just a small section of the screen. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a progress bar. Let's drag it in. Let's make its size on the X 201. And we'll make its size on the Y 18. Okay. Let's add some text. Drag it in, and we'll call this health. We'll do a search for percent. Let's see what color it is. It's blue, so I'm going to change that color to something that I prefer. Okay, it can be whatever color you want. Next, I'm going to go over to the graph, but before I do that, I'm going to rename this progress bar health bar. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the graph, and what we're going to do I'm going to cheat a little bit. Let's go over to the Monster BP, hit the magnifying glass. I'm going to go to its UI folder, and I'm going to take a look at the Monster Health widget. I'm going to go to the graph, and I'm going to copy this, but not that. So copy it, Control C to copy, head back to the player UI widget, and I'm going to paste the nodes in the graph. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab the health bar from this class, get it, and connect this to that, compile it, save it. We are now done with the player health. Let's head over to the first person character blueprint. What I'm going to do, I'm going to disconnect this event begin play by holding Alt and clicking, and drag it up here. Go ahead and create a custom event that will replace that. So I've made a custom event called HMD motion. You can create custom events by right clicking and going and typing in custom event, and we can create custom events that way and just connect it to that, whatever it is you want to execute. So you want to call that on begin play so that it stays intact. Let's create an event called call UI. So this will call the player's user interface. Go ahead and create a custom event called call player UI, and what this would do, it will create a it will basically call our widgets, our health widget. So we'll create widget, and we want the player UI widget. What we'll do is we'll promote this to a variable so that we can store it. Let's go ahead and rename this variable to player UI. And from this, let's add to viewport. I'm going to go ahead and drag a box over everything, press the C key, and add a nice comment. The next thing we want to do is set the health in the player UI. So I'm going to go ahead and create a custom event called set health in the player UI. I'm going to drag off this, I'm going to branch. Let's get the player UI, drag it onto the graph, and drag off that. And we want to check if it's valid, so type is valid and connect that to the condition. If it is valid, then we can call the set health event, which is inside of the player UI. Let's get our health variable and put that there. Let's drag a box over it, and let's add a nice comment by pressing C and type your comment in. Let's add a damage event for the player to receive damage. So create a custom event called do damage events. You just right click, custom event, and click on it and create your custom event. From your custom event, drag off that and type do once. We also need a custom event to reset this, so I'm going to reset it using a custom event called reset damage events. From that, we are going to set health, drag health in again, get it, minus, so hit the minus sign, so float, subtract float, and the value we're going to be taking away is 0.2. We need to clamp this, so let's clamp it. Clamp float between 0 and 1. I'm going to duplicate this by pressing Ctrl W, and that is clamped. Let's add a nice comment for that called damage events. Another thing we can add is a game over event, but we'll do that after we set up the game over widget. So let's head back to the folder in the content browser. Hit the browse button in your first person character blueprint, and what we're going to do, we're going to right click and create a new user interface. Let's call this game over underscore widget. Okay, let's open that. I'm going to add an image. Just drag it in, and I'm going to cover the whole screen. I'm going to make this black, like so. Next, I'm going to add some text. Drag the text in. Let's make the text red. I'm also going to set the text to say something like game over. Let's size to context by pressing this checkbox. And I'm going to change its size under appearance to 119. Let's add some buttons. So do a search for buttons, drag that in, and what we can do a search for text, and I'm literally just going to drag the text right onto the button like so and release. I'm going to make the text black. Now, this button, I'm going to size the context, like so. So that if I was to resize the text, the button will be resized accordingly. I'm going to call this button play again. And I'm going to change its size under appearance of the text to 53. So I'm going to copy this button. So in the hierarchy, I'm going to copy it. Right click, copy. It's the button that I copy because the children of the button, which is the text, will be automatically included. Then I'm going to go up here to the canvas panel. Then I'm going to right click on the canvas panel, and then I'm going to paste, and that will create another button in the top left corner. You can use arrow keys to move it, or you can just drag it into place. This button will say quit, and you can position it where you want. Okay. Let's click on the play again button. I'm going to rename it to play again underscore button, and I'm going to rename this one to quit underscore button. Now let's highlight the play again button as it is, scroll down and press the green plus beside on clicked. So now what I'm going to do is, because this is for the play again button, I'm going to drag in the play again button. I'm going to drag off this, and I'm going to type is hovered. Let's hold down B, left click to add our branch, connect this to that, connect this to this. And if that is the case, what we're going to do, we're going to execute a console command called restart level. So you can just drag off that and type execute console command. So console command, and type in restart level. There doesn't need to be there has to be no spaces on restart level, but it's not case sensitive. So yeah, that's all good. You can ignore those. Let's copy these two and paste them down here, because we're going to do the same thing again for quitting. Only difference is that when you quit, you just quit. Q-U-I-T. Quit. So if we head back to the designer and click our quit button, scroll down, on clicked, click that, drag this up here, this goes to the branch, and what I'm going to do is add a nice comment for all of these nodes. So I highlighted everything, press C key and type your comment. And that is the game over screen done. Let's head back to our first person character, and let's continue to make more events. So create a custom event called check player health, and from the check player health event, we're basically going to check if the health is below 0. You basically do that by dragging the health in, drag off that, equals equals, and this goes into the condition. From this we will do once, will basically create a widget. And we'll be creating the game over widget. Drag off that, add to viewport. There's a few things that we need to do. Right click, get player controller. Drag off that and type show mouse. We want to set show mouse cursor to true. And we want to set the input mode to UI only. And if you so choose, you can just drag that widget into the in widget to focus. Now if the health is not 0, let's just grab the player controller, copy it, and let's paste it down here. We basically want to set the let's also copy the show mouse cursor and paste it here. Connect this to that. We don't want to see the mouse cursor if we're alive, and also we want to set input mode to game only. Okay, so we're done there. So let's grab all of this, press C to comment, and add your comment as you so wish. We are now done with the player. First of all, before we leave, we need to add the events to the to be called. So up here, I'm going to right click and type event tick. Let's drag off this and type set health. And also from this, we're going to check player health. Okay, these are events. And we are done. We are going to head over to the animation blueprint for the monster, but before I do so, I'm going to add a event that I missed, which is call UI to the event begin play. So call UI. There we go. We are good to go. So let's head over to the monster animation blueprint, and I'm going to call the notify event that we created. So type in attack. We can see event and notify attack landed. So we're going to add that. I'm going to reuse some of these nodes. So I'm going to click this one and this one, holding control. You can click multiple. So control C, control V to paste. I'm going to connect these two like this. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to check if the player is within range. So player in attack range. So get player in attack range. From this, I'm going to do a branch. That goes here. And then if we're within range and we've attacked, then I'm going to drag from this, get player. We want to get our player variable. We're going to do damage events. So do damage to the player. That is true. So let's add a comment to all this. Next, we want to recover our AI from flinching from the attack from the player. So right click and type hit recover, and there it is. There's a notify. Let's click on that. So when the AI has recovered from a hit, what's going to happen is that the monster hit is going to be set to false, so we're no longer flinching. We're going to reuse this. I'm going to copy this and paste it down here. We're going to get the threat level. So get threat level, and if the threat level is greater than float, so float greater than float, it's greater than 0.7. So we're going to add a branch for this. If it is, then what's going to happen is we are going to set state, and the state we're setting is the set monster state. So Control W to duplicate. This is going to go to that. This is going to go to this. Make sure this is connected to target. If threat level is greater than 0.7, then we're going to set the state to chase player, and if not, we're going to set it to investigate. And both scenarios will raise the threat level by a value of, well, whichever value you want, but I'm going to go with 0.25. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to highlight all of this, add a comment, and we're all good there. Let's set up the animations. So let's go over to the anim graph, and we'll just right click and create a new state machine. So type state machine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to rename this. So I'm going to press F2 and I'm going to call this idle walk run underscores state machine. You can call it whatever you want. What I'm going to do with this is go in here, and I'm going to drag in the monster idle walk run. Okay, connects to that like that. Let's double click on this, and the speed is going to be our speed variable. Just drag that in and connect it. Let's head back to our anim graph. So what we can do now is we can blend by Boolean. So right click and type blend by bool. So blend poses by bool. Click on that. What we're going to do, we're going to connect attack to this Boolean right here. Let's get the zombie attack animation. Just going to drag this in. And the false pose is going to be the idle walk run. Let's create another state machine for when the AI character is attacked. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this, paste it over here, like so. I'm going to rename it. Press F2, and I'm going to call it monster hit. This is when it receives a hit. Let's go into that. I'm going to rename this one as well. Monster hit. You can go in. Let's get rid of this. And let's drag in our monster reaction or zombie reaction hit animation. Let's head back to the animation graph. I'm going to copy this and paste it. Now the hit is going to be the true pose. This is going to be the false pose. And it only occurs if we are hit. So I'm going to drag monster hit boolean into the graph and connect. And this will connect to the final output pose. And that is our animation setup. Let's finalize the animation setup in our monster BP character. So let's go over to monster BP character, the AI character. Let's click on our mesh, and the animation mode is using the animation blueprint, and the animation blueprint we're using is the monster animation blueprint. There we go. Now let's go to the event graph. Let's take a look for check player in range. So on the end of our check player in range, we are going to add some nodes. So let's get the mesh, drag it in, drag that off, and type get anim instance. Okay. From here, we will cast to monster anim BP, so the animation blueprint. We're going to set attack to true. By the way, this is off the true condition. So I'm going to hold Control and click every one of these. Control C to copy, Control V to paste. This one's going to be false. Let's check out the stop attacking the player if it's dead. So let's go over here, drag this off. I'm going to paste this down here as well. We're going to set this to false, and that's done. Lastly, let's go to the damage events. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to copy these nodes, so mesh, anim instance, and the cast to anim, the animation blueprint. I'm going to copy those by pressing Control C. I'm going to drag this out on damage events, and I'm going to paste these nodes here, like so. This will go into this, and from here we will set monster hit to true. Okay. And we'll also set the state So drag this in and set this to monster hit. And that is now done. Let's set up the AI's jumping animations. So I'm going to go into animations, and where it says jump, I'm going to duplicate it by pressing Ctrl W. Let's call this jump entry. Let's duplicate that again, and let's call this jump loop. Let's duplicate it one more time, and let's call that jump land, or jump end. Okay. So let's go into jump entry. Now, jump entry is basically going to be from the ground to the air. Okay. So about here. Just right click and remove frame 5 to 31. And there we go. That's our jump entry done. Next is our jump loop. So our jump loop is basically going to be our pose in the air. So let's go with that. Right click, remove frame 0 to 5, and right click it again and remove frame 1 to 26. So all we have is this static air pose. Now jump end is where we land, right before we land. So yeah, about here, because he's about to make contact with the ground. So right click and remove frame 0 to 18, and there we go. We now have our jumping animations done. Let's go ahead and set those animations up in our state machine. So let's go into the animation blueprint for our monster. And in our idle walk run state machine, we're going to open that. Let's drag off this, release, add state. Let's call this state jump entry. Let's make another state called jump loop. And we'll make one more state called jump end. This final state will return to the idle walk run state. So what determines whether we enter this state or not? Well, it's going to be whether we're falling or not. So if we double click on this, drag the is falling boolean onto the can enter transition. Let's head back to our state machine. Here is our jump entry. Let's add our jump entry animation by dragging it into the graph and connecting it up. Let's remove the loop animation because we do not want it to loop. Let's head back to the state machine. Let's go into our jump loop. Let's set up our jump loop animation by dragging it into the graph. Let's head back to the state machine and do the same for jump end. So for jump end, drag that into the graph and drag that there. What happens to exit the jump phase, we basically double click on this and we have to get is falling, and if it's false, so drag off that, release and type not Boolean, so not Boolean. Only when we're not falling can it return to walking and idle walk and run. Now for these two, for jump entry to go to jump loop, just double click on this, right click and type time remaining ratio. This is the one we want from jump entry. Now if this is less than, so drag off that and type the less than symbol, less than float, 0.1. So if it's less than 10%, then and only then can it enter the jump loop stage. And we're going to do the same thing for jump loop. So double click on this, right click, type time remaining ratio for jump loop, get the operator, so drag off that less than float, it's less than 0.1, and you can experiment with this to see what results you get. And there we go, that's the jumping setup. Let's create a navlink proxy which will allow our AI to jump over gaps. So in the AI folder, under Monster, right click, choose Blueprint class, and do a search for navlink. And what we want is navlink proxy. Select that, and I'm going to call it jump here. And that is our navlink proxy created. Let's create some functionality in our jump here navlink proxy. So I'm going to open that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click and add a event receive smart link reached. So add that. We want to throw the actor up in the air a little bit, so I'm going to add actor world offset. I'm going to throw him up on the z-axis 150 units. You can experiment with this to see what works for you. And after that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set actor rotation. And the actor is going to be the agent that's coming out of here, so I'm going to connect this to that and connect this to this. So it needs to be facing the right way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get from the agent, I'm going to get actor location, and then I'm going to drag this to here and type find look at rotation, like so. So agent goes to this and this goes to this. The target is going to be the destination, and that will be the rotation. From this, the rotation will be sent to set actor rotation, like this. From here, I'm going to create a timeline So let's create a timeline. So right click, type timeline, and click add timeline. Okay. Let's call this, I don't know, what should we call it? Let's call it lerp value. So lerp value. And in this timeline, I'm going to add a float. And I'm going to call that alpha. Hold shift, left click, and left click again to add a keyframe. I'm going to set the time for that keyframe, the first keyframe, to be 0, and the value to be 0. And the time for the second keyframe to be 2, but the value to be 1. I'm going to press these, zoom to fit horizontal and vertical. I'll just change the duration to 2. Okay, let's go back to the event graph. And this will go to play from start. Now, we want to check that the agent is actually a good distance away in order for it to be considered to be driven along to set its vector. So what we're going to do, let's get the location of the actor, which is here, and we can use it again. We can subtract it, so minus vector, and we're taking it away from the destination. We're getting a vector length of that. And if it's greater than 250, we could try 250. So if it's greater than float, so float greater than float, or we could try 200, it doesn't matter. If it's greater than 200, so let's add a branch, hold B, left click. If it's greater than that, then we are allowed to update it. We are going to set the agent's location. So set actor location. And we are basically interpolating from one vector to another. So we are coming from the agent's current location. We are lerping it to the destination location. Like so. We can teleport it, it doesn't matter. And the alpha value is going to be the alpha from the timeline that we're going to there, like that. You can add a descriptive comment to this, but I'm going to leave it as it is. So now we're ready to test the AI in the level. Before we jump into the level, we're going to manipulate the destination vector. So hold Control and drag out the B destination vector, release it, and we're going to add vector. Okay, what we want is vector plus vector. And what I'm going to do, the destination is going to be the destination but we're going to add 75 or whatever value you want to the Z axis, and that goes into the back into B. This would allow the AI to be placed on the ground and not through it, as what happened to me before. Okay, so I'm going to compile that, and now we are really ready to test it out in a level. Let's head over to the level. So the first thing you need is a nav mesh bounds. You can find that by searching the classes, nav mesh bounds. There it is. So we drag it in, drag it into your level, and you can press P to see what areas are able to be navigated by the AI. So I'm going to scale this to cover the entire level, like so, and scale it like that. Up here like so. And that's the nav mesh bound setup. Next, we're going to add our jump here nav link proxy. So drag that into the level from our AI monster folder. Let's see where we can move it. I'm going to put this point up on this ledge like so. You just click on the point and just move it. It's really easy. Click on that one, we can move that one over here like that. So now what we do, we basically have to take a look at the settings here. So if we scroll down, where it says Smart Link is relevant under Smart Link, make sure that's enabled. Okay, let's go back up to where it says Simple Link. We want to copy left, so right click, copy left, this vector here. Scroll down, and to where it says link relative start under Smart Link, we're going to right click on that and paste. Go back up, right click right, copy, scroll down, go to link relative end, right click, paste. Brilliant. So now all we need to do is build paths that will rebuild our navigation. And that's finished. Let's drag our AI character into the level. I'm going to make him not see me, so he starts facing away from the player. When we play the game, we notice that he doesn't respond to sound. Let's quickly fix that. So let's navigate to the first person blueprint character. Let's go inside of that character. Under components, we're going to add a new component. So let's click add component and type noise. We want a pawn noise emitter. Okay. Now we need to find where we actually fired a gun. It's about here. Spawn projectile, we can see fire. I'm going to go to the end of this and I'm going to drag off this and type make noise. We are going to go with this one. We can leave it as it is. We could even add in the noise location if we want, but this should work. Let's see what will happen if we alert our AI from a ledge. So play. I'm going to shoot. As you can see, he jumped on the ledge and now he's coming back down. Let's make some final adjustments to our monster BP character. So I'm going to click on him and I'm going to click edit blueprint, open blueprint editor. I'm going to head over to the viewport and I'm going to click on the mesh, skeletal mesh. Let's do a search for collision, so COL, and we're going to change the collision preset to custom. We're going to block all except pawn, so we're going to ignore the pawn. We're going to change collision enabled to collision enabled query and physics. We're going to change object type to world static. Now let's make some adjustments to our movement component. So click the movement component. We're going to do a search for orient, so ORIENT, and we want to enable orient rotation to movement. Let's go up here to defaults, type in yaw, so YAW, and we're going to disable use control of rotation yaw. Compile, and that's it. Our character is ready. I want to thank you all for taking part in this tutorial series. If you have any questions or if you get stuck, drop a message down in the comment section and I'll be sure to respond as soon as possible. Thanks again.